my pleasure to introduce Chris Nineham. Chris was an extreme, ally and advocate and supporter of our work, and partnered with us 2 years ago to also demand an end to the war on Yemen. Chris is a political activist and founding member of the Stop the War Coalition and is currently a vice chair. He served under Jeremy Corbyn from 2011 to 2015. He was one of the organizers of the 2 million February 15, 2003 demonstration in London and central to the international coordinated efforts that led to the protests globally. Thank you, Chris, for all the work that you do to bring peace to our world. It's people like you that really keep us safe. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Aisha, and thanks to everyone for organising this fantastic event and for all of your campaigning over the years. And I think it is an enormous relief that there has at last been some progress towards peace in Yemen. But as others have said, there remains so much to do on the issue. One thing is continuing to campaign over the isolation and the blockade of Yemen. There's clearly a continuing humanitarian catastrophe that needs to be dealt with. But I also think there needs to be some truth-telling and reckoning here, because it is not just that the West has been complicit in the war on Yemen. In my opinion, the reality is that the disaster in Yemen could not have happened without the enormous backing by successive US governments, British governments, and other governments in the West for the attack. There's been an Oxfam report that came out earlier this year, which particularly focuses on the British government's involvement, but goes through in detail the extent of the catastrophe. According to this report, 39% of all Saudi attacks forced civilians to lose their homes. The report records an absolutely devastating level of destruction to Yemeni infrastructure as a direct result of the invasion and the attack and the military follow through, including, it's worth remembering, numerous direct hits on hospitals, on clinics, on ambulances that this Oxfam report regards as being direct and deliberate war crimes. I think all this is important because, first of all, there is every danger that this war could restart. I don't think that the diplomatic processes that are taking place at the moment are anything like resilient enough to ensure peace. I think there's also continued danger if the US and Britain and other Western allies continue their current policies in the Middle East. There is a danger of further proxy wars breaking out and further Western involvement in the region. I also think it's important that we learn lessons from this war around the question of the hypocrisy of US and Western foreign policy. At the moment, our governments and media are absolutely obsessed with pointing out, in particular, the war crimes, the very real war crimes of Vladimir Putin in his invasion of Ukraine. They are constantly calling out the Iranian government. They are ramping up a kind of hostile rhetoric against the Chinese regime and so on. All this at the very same time, all these developments have taken place at the time when they have been backing the authoritarian regime in Saudi Arabia, one of the most vicious regimes in the world, at the time when it has generated the biggest humanitarian catastrophe through its pursuit of the war in Yemen. And this isn't just a question of calling out double standards. I think this is a question of understanding that the policy that is being pursued by governments on both sides of the Atlantic in various different war theatres is not driven by humanitarian concerns. It's not driven by some consideration about the rights or the democratic possibilities and futures of various people around the globe. It is deeply cynical. It is based on power projection. It is based on an assessment and a absolutely resolute pursuit of corporate interests by our governments. And I think that's a lesson that we have to draw from this terrible sequence of events. And I want to end by saying that we're meeting in the week which marked the 20th anniversary of the catastrophic invasion of Iraq by the US and Britain in particular. And it seems to me that that was an event that generated many of the problems that we face, and particularly the people of the Middle East face today. And the kind of unfolding events in the Middle East need to be understood in the context of that invasion. I also think that one of its legacies, and a slightly more hopeful legacy, has been the generation of anti-war opinion across the West and anti-war activism and anti-war organization. And I think we should take some credit here and understand that over the last 2 decades, we have made some difference. If you read the internal documents where the Western powers are considering their next interventions and considering their military options, time after time, they do pay attention. They do take into consideration domestic public opinion, by which partly they mean the anti-war mobilizations that have taken place. And I think we need to take some heart from that fact. And as the situation in the Middle East continues to be extremely tense, as the US ramps up its hostility and its military mobilization against both the Russian regime and the Chinese, I think it's very important that we do take some heart and some hope from what we've achieved already, because we have to strengthen the anti-war movement. We have to keep mobilizing. We now face the possibility of big power confrontation between NATO and Russia, between NATO powers and China, obviously all nuclear armed powers. And I think we have to draw from this experience the need, amongst other things, the need to strengthen our networks, strengthen this kind of international coordination, but also build anti-war organization and anti-war mobilization in every town, in every city, in every trade union, in every workplace, in every university, right across the world, because our futures are challenged, I would say, by the continuing drive to war.